Welcome into NFL Draft by Chat Sports. I'm your host, Sperry. A couple days back, I did a video talking about surprising NFL draft prospects that could sneak their way in to the first round of the 2025 NFL Draft. Today, we're going to be talking about players that many people expect to be in round one that I think have a chance to potentially fall out of round one of this year's NFL Draft. Before we get into it today, predict it for me down there in the comment section, guys. What player will surprisingly not be a first-round pick this year? There's always a pick or two or three or four or five, guys that most people expect to be in the first round that end up getting to day two. Let me know your prediction down there in the comment section. We'll start with a quarterback here, which is Jaxson Dart. Now, Dart is certainly somebody that is heavily rumored to be going in round one somewhere in the first round, all right? And there's some people that are even saying definitively there's no way he's getting out of the first. But I do think that there's a chance that he gets out of the first. All right, we've seen guys like Malik Willis and Will Levis, guys that were definitely heavily rumored to be in the first round in their respective drafts fall out of the first round. I definitely think Dart has a chance to not go on day one. You take a look at my scouting report here for Mr. Jaxson Dart, and I think there's a lot of things to like about his film. I think he's got good arm strength. I would say it's B+ to A- NFL starter arm strength, so above average arm. He's got some really good accuracy to all levels of the field. You can make an argument alongside Tyler Shough, in my opinion, that Jaxson Dart is the most accurate quarterback in this class to all areas of the field. His touch on his deep passes are really nice as well, which is something you really want to see, especially if you're an offense and a team that likes to throw the ball down the sideline. Cough, cough, Pittsburgh Steelers. The deep ball efficiency is really good, obviously. That is an Ole Miss offense that loves to bomb the ball down the field. Jaxson was very, very proficient at that area of the field. He's also a plus rusher. He's not a dynamic rusher, but he is certainly somebody that can move, and he's got a little bit of wiggle to him. You do see some anticipation flashes on his film. I won't say it's as common as, say, Tyler Shough's film out of Louisville this year, but I will say it's more than, say, a Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado. So you do see the anticipation flashes. Now, it was a pretty college-y style of offense, so there wasn't a ton of opportunities to show off that anticipation, but when he did have a full field progression read, he did show some flashes of mental processing as well. And then I think teams are really going to like his competitive toughness. This is somebody that players love playing for and with, and I think if you're looking for a locker room leader, Jaxson Dart can certainly provide that. But the negatives here, I think that there are mental processing questions because this is such a college-y style of offense that he ran there at Ole Miss. It's lots of RPOs, lots of screens, lots of wide-open receivers on his first read where he doesn't have to go through a full field progression. So it's going to be an adjustment to go from that style of offense at Ole Miss to a pro-style offense in the league, and there's going to be an adjustment period there with Ole Miss. Plain and simply, I also don't love his pocket presence. Cam Ward, Tyler Shough, in my opinion, and then Shedeur Sanders actually has some pretty nice pocket presence in this year's class. Jaxson Dart is the guy that I think has a negative grade in terms of his pocket presence. He just doesn't feel pressure all that well, and if he's holding the football for too long, he can drift into pressure, all these different things. I also think, especially late in games and in the fourth quarter and clutch time, his decision-making can get really, really bad. I mean, just look at the Florida game last year. He had 3 turnover-worthy throws over the course of 10 throws, all right? It was a terrible fourth quarter in the clutch against that Florida Gators team. And, that wasn't the only game where he played not that well when the game was on the line and the defense knew he had to throw the football. And because of the lack of pocket presence, because he's not a dynamic athlete or playmaker outside of structure, I do think that his upside is a little bit limited here. I think that he can be a starting caliber quarterback with his arm strength, with his ability to throw the ball down the field with touch and accuracy, but I think he's more in line to be like a mid-level starter, like maybe a Derek Carr, than somebody like a truly elite quarterback in the National Football League, and I do think that upside is limited when it comes to Jaxson Dart. And, I think that the big question surrounding Dart here is a team in round one willing to take a guy like that where he is potentially going to be a starting quarterback in the league if he can develop some of the mental processing stuff, if he can show anticipation on his film more often, if he can make that transition from a very quarterback-friendly college scheme in Lane Kiffin's offense there at Ole Miss, and if he can handle more pressure in his face, if he can handle the pro scheme here in the National Football League. Those questions will certainly have to be answered, and if he does answer those, he'll be a mid-level starter, but that lack of upside and true star potential, I think, is something that could potentially keep him out of round one entirely, so that will be a very interesting thing to see once we get to Green Bay about a month from now. So let me know down there in the comment section. Will Jaxson Dart be a top 25 draft pick this year? Give me a yes or a no for today's pinned comment. YouTube's going to throw you an ad break here in just a couple of seconds. When that happens, take advantage of that time by giving me a yes or a no. And if you think he does go in the top 25, let me know the team that you think he goes to down there in the comments. Then we'll talk about a pair of wide receivers here that I think have a chance of surprisingly falling out of the first round. Now, to be clear, I have first-round grades on both Luther Burden III and Emeka Egbuka. I think they're both really good wide receiver prospects, but Luther Burden III has been falling down draft boards for whatever reason over the last several weeks. Many people are now projecting him to not get taken in the first round entirely. Some of the concerns is some people think, he's not the best teammate in the world. And then there's also the thing where most of his catches last year came at or behind the line of scrimmage. But really, when I look at his film, guys, I attribute that more to the Missouri offense doing a terrible job getting him the football down the field. He's still, I think, a pretty good route runner. He can get more precise in his route running, but he's got world-class acceleration, really good top-end speed. He can track the deep ball in the air down the field. And then what really makes him special, guys, is his playmaking ability with the ball in his hands in open space. I mean, he reminds me a lot of Malik Neighbors. I call him Malik Neighbors Jr. because he's not quite what Malik was last year, but he is still a very dynamic playmaker with the ball in his hands. And, he's a very well-rounded receiver as well that can make tough catches over the middle and down the sideline. I think that he's worthy of a top 20 pick in this year's draft class, but certainly a possibility that he could fall down the draft board. Then when it comes to Emeka Egbuka out of Ohio State, the reason why he may be falling is because there's other receivers that can play a true X position, which is usually, the most cherished wide receiver position in the league. Guys like Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State, guys like Emeka Egbuka out of Stanford, those guys are rising up draft boards, whereas Emeka Egbuka is somebody that's going to be more of a true Z or slot wide receiver. Now, I think he's going to be really good at that, at those things. I compare him to Jaxson Smith-Njigba of the Seattle Seahawks when he was coming out of Ohio State. Now, I was lower on JSN than a lot of people were. Some people thought he was a top 5 level pick. I had a first-round grade on Jaxson Smith-Njigba, and I have the same grade on Emeka Egbuka. I think he's a really good route runner. He's got very reliable hands. He's good after the catch. He brings good size to the table, super proficient route runner, and a great teammate as well. So both of those guys, in my opinion, are fully worthy of being first-round picks, with other wide receivers starting to rise up the draft board that are bigger, can play true X positions. I think that there's a chance that Luther Burden III and Emeka Egbuka could be the ones that pay the price for that. Then when it comes to the offensive tackle position, somebody that could surprisingly not make it in round one is Josh Conerly Jr. out of Oregon. Now, he's been somebody that's been consistently mocked at the end of the first round for a while now, but you look at the offensive tackles in this class: Will Campbell, Armin Membu, Kelvin Banks Jr., Josh Simmons. Those are 4 guys that I think for sure are going to end up going in round one, and it's definitely possible that that 5th offensive tackle doesn't come off the board on day one. It's certainly possible that if Kansas City doesn't trade up and they still want to get a future left tackle, Conerly would be a really good fit for what Kansas City wants to do at 31, but I guess we'll just have to see. I think if there's going to be one odd man out at the offensive tackle position this year, it'll probably be Josh Conerly Jr. because, he's not the biggest guy in the world. He can get bullied by the bull rush at times. He plays with great footwork technique, and, he's got great athleticism, and I think that he can play right away in the National Football League, and somebody would be getting a steal on him in round one, or in round two, I should say, if he makes it there. But I do think he'd be the odd man out compared to the other 4 round one offensive tackles in this class. So make sure you guys click that thumbs up icon if you haven't already. If you're enjoying today's content, we try to get a NFL draft video out to you guys every single day on this channel. Of course, we got weekly mock drafts, in-depth prospect analysis, all that great stuff. So if you appreciate the hard work that we're putting in for you guys here at NFL Draft by Chat Sports, click that thumbs up icon and boost that algorithm for us on today's show. Another player, now we'll move over to the defensive side of the ball. Azarey'h Thomas is somebody that has been consistently mocked in the first round of mock drafts from a number of different NFL draft analysts. But after his performance at his pro day where he ran a super slow 40 time, It's looking more and more like he's probably going to end up having to go on day 2 or maybe even day 3 at this point. It was that bad of a 40 time for somebody whose skill set really does rely on bump and run coverage. And in the National Football League, with the time that he ran, like, it's just not going to be good enough, all right? And I think that Azarey'h Thomas is somebody with really good film, especially in press man coverage. So if you're a team that likes to do a lot of that aggressive bump and run type of coverage, then Thomas is somebody that maybe you feel would be a steal on day 2 in this year's class. But I think with the poor performance at his pro day, that probably limited his prospects as a round one guy. And at the end of the day, I might even be surprised if he ends up getting taken in round 1 at this point in time. Now, a position that I want to talk about here that is half of this list, all right? We have 10 players today. 5 of them are edge rushers, because I think that this is going to be the most volatile position in this year's class, because I think that there's a wide array of different types of edge rushers, and some guys have some issues off the field that are going to come into play here. So without further ado, let's talk about the first guy on my list here, James Pearce Jr. out of Tennessee. Now, in my opinion, on film, Pearce is a top 3 edge rusher in this class and has legit number 1 edge rusher upside, all right? He's not the best run defender in the world, but he's not the worst either. And then he's got some really, really proficient pass rushing skill sets at his disposal. He's got surprising power for his size. He uses his hands very well. He can attack all levels of the ways that you can attack offensive tackles. He can win with speed and bend around the edge. He can win with finesse both on the inside and outside shoulder, and then he can win on inside counters. All right, but how Pearce falls in this draft, guys, is if the scouting reports in terms of the off-field teammate type of personality issues is something that comes up and is a big negative on these NFL teams' boards, because he's somebody that has a little bit of a history of not being a great teammate, as somebody that doesn't necessarily have a phenomenal work ethic. Now, he's an absolute physical beast, and he's actually a pretty darn technically proficient football player. So the interview process is going to be very important for him. You know, the on-the-ground work from the scouts, you know, talking with people on the ground there in Knoxville is going to be very important. And, you know, if that stuff checks out, he could be a top 15 pick. He is that good of a player, but there's also the chance that those reports coming from the area scouts do not favor James Pearce Jr., and he ends up falling out of the first round entirely. So I guess we'll see where he ends up going. Another guy that I think I'm a little bit lower on, some people think Jalen Walker out of Georgia is a top 10 pick in this year's draft class. I'm nowhere close to that, guys. I think Walker is going to be a designated pass rusher on the edge to start his career, with a chance to potentially become an every down starter on the edge. But I think if you want him to play off-ball linebacker, you're going to be very disappointed. He's terrible in pass coverage. He's not very good in his run diagnostics. The best thing about him is blitzing, and that's exactly why the Georgia Bulldogs played him as pretty much exclusively a blitzing inside linebacker, kind of in like a Devin White type of role when he was with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where all he did was blitz. And, you know, I think if you're going to be drafting Walker as an off-ball linebacker, that's what you're drafting him to be a designated pass rusher, kind of like Frankie Louvu from the Washington Commanders, only Frankie plays all 3 downs for the Commanders and is actually pretty decent in coverage and in run defense. Jalen Walker is not, so I think that he's going to be more of a late first round type of player, and I think it's entirely possible that he ends up falling out of the first round entirely, in my opinion. Then you look at some of the other potential surprise round 1 fallouts. I see a lot of mock drafts having Donovan Ezeraku out of Boston College, Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M, and Nick Scorton out of Texas A&M, all going in round 1. And I think all of those guys have the potential of falling out, all right? Because there's so many guys in this class at edge rusher, guys, that are really mid-level kind of, probably more like number 2 edge rusher type of players than true number 1 talents. And those guys usually go at the end of the first round. So it's all going to come down to what the teams looking for edge at the end of the first round are looking for. And there's going to be at least 2 or 3 really good edge rusher prospects that make it to day 2 this year, just because of the sheer amount of good edge rusher prospects that are in this year's class. I really like Ezeraku's film. He's very smooth, even though he's not the fastest guy in the world. He's a very good speed rusher with the kind of bend that he brings to the table. He's also an excellent hand fighter. He gets to the quarterback very consistently and has a lot of different ways to beat you. And then when it comes to Shamar Stewart and Nick Scorton, the guys out of Texas A&M, both of them have lost weight, which concerns me a little bit. It concerns me less with Scorton because I think that he's a very well-rounded player. I see Scorton as a really good number 2 edge rusher in his career. But Shamar Stewart is somebody that really only brings a bull rush in this class, and he played at like 285 pounds last year, and now he's down to like 265 to test for the combine and his pro day. And, you know, it's going to be a big question whether he puts that weight back on. And if he plays at 265, is he going to have the same bull rush that he had there with the Aggies in 2024? And if that's not there, he doesn't really have any finesse, and he has no speed profile to his pass rushing skill set at all. Now, he's a great athlete. He brings an unusual amount of power to that bull rush, but his lack of production in college and the lack of variety in the ways that he can win as a pass rusher really has me worried about Shamar Stewart. But apparently, the NFL is falling in love with him. And listen, man, like, the NFL tends to fall in love with guys like this. Freak athletes with great power and great bull rushes. Lucas Van Ness went to the Green Bay Packers. Tyree Wilson went top 5 to the Las Vegas Raiders. All right, Trayvon Walker, for Christ's sakes, went number 1 overall because of it and had this pretty much same exact skill set that Shamar Stewart is bringing to the table. So there's definitely a lot of top 10, top 15 buzz surrounding Shamar Stewart, and I actually think he will end up being a first-round pick. But if I'm being honest, guys, when I look at his film, I don't see somebody that is necessarily ready to be a number 1 edge rusher, at least heading into his rookie season in the National Football League. The potential is certainly there, and sometimes you bank on that potential, especially if you're a rebuilding football team. But especially now that he's shed weight, I don't know if he's going to be as good of a run defender, and I don't know if his bull rush is going to be there the same way it was at Texas A&M. So I think Shamar Stewart is somebody to keep your eye on as a potential bust in this year's NFL draft class. So what say you guys? Let me know down there in the comment section. How many edges do you think will go in round 1 in this year's NFL draft? I think for sure there will be around 4, maybe 5, but let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. I think for sure Abdul Carter, Mike Green, and James Pearce Jr. should all go in the first round, but let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. Click that subscribe button if you haven't already. You guys are the absolute best. We're going to have more NFL draft content coming your way. Next week, I'm actually going to be putting out my official edge rankings, ranking all the top edge rushers in this year's draft class, so you're not going to want to miss that. Click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Until next time, guys, peace out.